The end of the day here, so we'll keep rolling. We got Brian online and we have Charlie here, so we'll keep things rolling and keep us moving along for the day. Last two to go. So they're both going to do a kind of a combined weed update here. So Charlie, if you haven't met him yet, he's been up here since about July. Yeah, somewhere around there. He's our new extension weed specialist in Williston. That position used to be a cropping assistant specialist that Claire Keene used to have, and she's now our state small grains agronomist down in Fargo. So they changed it to a weed specialist position. So like I said, Charlie's gonna talk a little bit here, Palmer, Amaranth, and Waterhemp. So he knows a lot more about it than me. So I'll take care of it.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Charlie. Again, I'm weed extender on Williston Extension Center. And I just got hired last July. But before that, I was at Montana State University. I did my PhD there, and I worked mainly on Kojak, mainly like we'll say, ALS and the Canberra and Kojak. And there I also work long-term studies about Kojak, and it's a herbicide crop safety and efficacy trials while I was at Montana State University. So my role at the Williston Research Center is to provide outreach as well as conduct research programs for tackle weed problems out in the Northwest. With more focus on eastern Montana as well as Northwest counties here in North Dakota. I chose this topic because I communicated with Brian, and he usually has a lot of data every year, new updates on data, and I chose this way. I know many years before, in recent years, there have been many educational efforts for increased awareness of Palmer Amaranth and Waterhemp, but weeds don't, maybe they take for rest in the wintertime, but they always ahead. To keep ahead of the game, I guess I need to talk about Palmer Amaranth and Waterhemp. So I asked myself, where does these two weed species rank in the U.S.? So this is a survey in 2022, where this is the top 10 most common and most troublesome weeds among broadleaf crops, fruits, and vegetables. And they had about 191 respondents. This is composed of crop consultants, agronomists, farmers, people from the academe, from the government, as well as people from the industry. And these are the top 10 most common, meaning the most weeds that they see out in the field, and most troublesome, meaning the toughest weeds to control. And as you can see, Palmer and Waterhemp are right within the top 6 of the most, they're top 2, the most common. Palmer was ranked 2, Waterhemp was ranked 6. And Palmer was the most troublesome, the toughest to control weed. It was ranked number 1, and Waterhemp was ranked number 5th in the nation. But off topic here, Kochia is always there too. And previous year, it's ranked number 3, but previous years too, those 3, Palmer, Kochia, and Waterhemp, have always been in the top 6, not in the top 10. So why is that? Why are they the most common and tough to control weeds? Majority of that is probably because of the biology of how Palmer and Waterhemp is. Compared to other pigweed species like Frederick pigweed or Palmer amaranth, Waterhemp had a late emergence, emerges late and has a long emergence period. Palmer has been shown or been observed to emerge late May, all the way to late September, especially following after wheat harvest, where there's an open canopy. Waterhemp has also been observed to emerge late April and mid-May, all the way through early August. So in terms of controlling these weeds in these times, unlike some of our weeds that by probably at the end of the summer or start of the summer or mid-summer, all of them have germinated and emerged, and therefore they're prone to control. You can pretty much expect that during these times, all the way through the end of the season, you have varying levels of maturity of either Palmer amaranth and Waterhemp. So it can grow rapidly, but it accumulates a lot of biomass in just a short amount of time. It can grow about 1 to 2 inches per day and grow up to 12 feet. And because of that, it takes a lot of nutrients as well as compete with sunlight. And it has been shown that palmer can reduce yields in corn and soybean by 91% and 79%. Watering has also been shown in studies that can reduce the yield of corn by 74% and 63% in soybean. Now, major reason why they're troublesome and common is that they produce a lot of seeds. And again, you've seen pictures of those very big palmers and waterhemp, but due to this reason, they're very aggressive weeds, so you can pretty much take over a field if you don't control it. And a million seeds is when it happens when uncompetitive conditions, but even with competitive conditions, they can produce about 100,000 to 500,000 seeds per plant. And the small seededness, it's one thing too that they're small, meaning that they have to germinate, or they should be on top or near the surface of the soil in order to germinate. And with our no-till conditions here out in the West, it pretty much, it favors the germination and emergence of water and palmer amaranth. And their seeds are really small, maybe on average about 1 millimeter. They can pretty much go into crevices and cracks, pockets, contaminated equipments, combines, and etc. So palmer and waterhemp are dioecious, meaning they have separate male and female plants. It's obligate outcrosser. That means that it passes on its genes, including resistance genes, through pollen. It spreads through pollen as well as through seeds. But outcrossing meaning that it can generate a population that is really, really genetically diverse. And genetic diversity means that populations or species that have high genetic diversity can withstand more of selection pressures from the environment, as well as selection pressures from crop production practices. So they become more resilient to those. Both species have allelopathy. They produce biochemicals that interfere with the germination, as well as the emergence of other plants, even crops or other weeds. And more importantly, palmer and waterhemp have the tendency to develop resistance to herbicides. And populations have been shown that some palmer and waterhemp populations have also multiple resistance to different sites of action. Talking about propensity to develop resistance, here this is data showing the cumulative cases of herbicide-resistant breadroot pigweed, which is here, waterhemp here, and then palmer. You can clearly see that cases of herbicide resistance with waterhemp, palmer amaranth over the years, over the decades, is almost 3 times more than that of breadroot pigweed, which is the most common pigweed that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. So that that says a lot about propensity to develop resistance to herbicides. They're more likely than to develop resistance compared to regular pigweed.
Just out of curiosity, if you can go back to your slide. Why don't we have any data from 2010 to 2020 on redroot pigweed? Doesn't look like there's any data between 2010 and 2020, where everything else took off in between 2010 and 2020.
That is a great question. Oh, I took this from the University of Idaho. There's data from Idaho. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I just seeing that 2010, it seems that there's a marked increase in data between 2010 and 2020, but there's nothing for redroot pigweed.
Yes, exactly. That's a great.
Wasn't in the budget. Quit checking.
Okay. I'll ponder on that later.
Interesting.
Sorry, no problem. So in terms of worldwide, these are the top 15 worst weeds worldwide. So palmer, amaranth, is right here, third. This is based on the amount of resistances to sites of action. So 9 here is not a group. It's the number of sites of action that palmer amaranth has been known to have resistance with. this doesn't say that one population have all resistance to 9 modes of action, but at least one of them. Collecting all the data from all the palmer amaranth populations all over the world, all of those populations have resistance. At least one of those have at least have resistance to 9 sites of action. And not far from that is a palmer amaranth. All the populations of waterhemp. All the populations of waterhemp have known resistances to 7 sites of action. So the only exception is that in waterhemp, we have yet to see populations that have resistance to glufosinate or some dinitroalunes, which is ricinoline or trephan. So they're definitely in the top 7 worst weed in the world in terms of developing resistance to many different sites of action. And just to kind of know the distribution of waterhemp as well as the origin. So Palmer amaranth is actually a native to the desert. So they can definitely withstand the conditions here. Came from the desert, and it should be able to survive out here in the Northwest. And this is the distribution of Palmer amaranth. Basically, the red are the states where Palmer amaranth has been present, confirmed present, but Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, they have yet to see Palmer amaranth in the state, and that's what they're trying to keep away from. Also, there are some states in the Northeast that don't have Palmer amaranth. In North Dakota, this is the map of distribution map curated by the North Dakota Department of Agriculture. So first detection of Palmer amaranth was in 2018. It was detected in 5 counties. Today, there were about 19 counties in total where Palmer amaranth has been detected or confirmed. But the green counties are the counties that where Palmer was previously found, but still detected. The blue counties are the counties where Palmer amaranth has been found, but no longer detected. And just recently, last year, there was 4 counties where Palmer amaranth has been detected. And these were Williams, Hettinger, Kidder, and Stark counties. I think the Hettinger County, they found 10 plants of Palmer amaranth or so. In Williams, Stark, and Kidder counties, about 1 or 2 Palmer amaranths were confirmed visually as well confirmed through genetic analysis. And these were all eradicated and for next year always being monitored. For waterhemp, waterhemp is a native to the US again, but it's native to the Midwest. And it's mostly combined, its natural habitat is on floodplains and riverbanks of the Midwest. It occurs through most of the eastern and southern United States. But it has been a major problem in the Midwest, especially in the corn and soybean crop production systems. Because mainly it has developed resistance to herbicides in those cropping systems. It spread through the West. Basically, you'll find waterhemp from North Dakota to Maine, and then from New Mexico all the way through not Florida but Georgia. But these pockets of here, we believe that waterhemp found in these states were introduced. So in the 1980s, where there's an expansion of agriculture, new widespread adoption of no-till systems. I think most of the scientists would agree that those were also the factors that how waterhemp spread throughout from the Midwest all the way to the west part of the western part of the United States. So those were the factors. Herbicide traits made it easier to kill weeds with traded crops and widespread adoption of no-till practices. In North Dakota, this is the map curated by Joe Likely. This is the counties where waterhemp has been detected or has been present. But this is not to say that water hemp in this part of the county is widespread. Most of the water hemp that we have in the state is mostly contained in the southeast. So basically from Fargo to Jamestown, and you draw a line down to South Dakota, that's where most of the water hemp populations are. But just right across the border from here in Montana in 2020, it has been found in Roosevelt County as well as in Perry County. And it was by the railroad track. So more likely it was brought in by a train car. So what are the sources of Palmer amaranth? And this could apply to water hemp as well. And these are the known sources of Palmer that was introduced into the state. There are a few cases where infested rail cars was the source. There were 1 or 2 cases that were unknown, we didn't know. And custom combine operations, that's what happened in Henniger County, where they hired custom combine operation and contaminated with amaranth seeds. And now, last year, we detected it there. Seed mixes, when the time when it was droughty, a lot of people planted forage crops, cover crops, and in those seed mixes, Palmer amaranth was traced as well. Contaminated equipment purchased from the Midwest. Those can be a source too of Palmer amaranth. Waterfowl. So this study right here, for Palmer in 2017, showed that they can survive the gut of waterfowl. Birds that from the south migrate into the north, and that could be a source of Palmer amaranth water hemp as well, and including common lamb squatters. For the most part, it was through animal feed that was the main, in half a dozen or so cases where Palmer has been traced to grain screenings. Actually, when these grain screenings were contaminated with Palmer and then used as a cattle feed. In particular, there were many instances where it was traced back to sunflower screenings, and where there's sunflower screenings that were used cattle feed, and where the manure are, we also find Palmer amaranth and in hay bales and feeding piles and cattle feed areas. So what happens if we don't be vigilant in terms of knowing the sources of preventing introduction of Palmer amaranth or water in our field? So basically, this is what happened. This field is a soybean field. There's supposed to be soybean here underneath, and there's a cornfield. This is the Joe likely. And right here is a soybean field that's starting to mature, so it's kind of color layout. But what happened here is that cattle feed was brought into this farm to feed cattle and overwintering in the overwintering field. Grain screens were imported, semi-loads of them into this field, and then Palmer went undetected for a few years. Remember, it was only 2018 when Palmer was detected, but in just a few years' time, it had a pretty robust weed seed bank of Palmer. So this is definitely a case in Cass County. What they did, or correctly did, was collected seeds out of this from these population here and tested them for herbicide, screened them for herbicides. And these are the herbicides that he used. Roundup at these rates, 1x and 3 times the usual rate. And these were all sprayed in 3-inch Palmer. So he used Roundup, Raptor, Flexter, Atrazine, Dicamba, as well as 2,4-D. And what he found was that this population was imported into that field. He found out that these populations have resistance. Just one population have resistance to group 9, group 2, group 5, group 27, and group 4s. And he suspects that this population could be resistant to group 3 and group 15s as well. So here you have an imported population of imported population of Palmer amaranth that came from grain screenings. And what you have in turn, as a result, you have a population that have resistance to 5 sites of action and potentially 7. So we know that Palmer and water hemp produce a lot of seeds. And now that, based on this study, in some of these populations, we will be importing populations that have multiple resistance to most of the herbicides that we use. So it's very important to know where the sources are, as well as prevent them from going to seed if we found them in our fields.
Has there been any studies on natural, i.e. fire, prior to or after seed, pollination? Does burning Palmer work? Or does it come back the next year?
So there were studies that I've seen that, herbicide post-harvest applications can reduce seed production. Definitely, there's some electrocution studies in some other weeds, probably Palmer and water hemp as well. But it does not fully eliminate seed production. So it will just have regrowth, and you can still produce seeds. So the best way to really control it is to detect it early. First, prevent it from going into your field, and if you have it, you have to scout vigilantly to detect it early and not let it go to seed. So the good news is that Palmer and pigweed, Palmer, amaranth, and water hemp seeds are short-lived. So this was a study, 10-year study, basically the collected Palmer and water hemp seeds, buried them in the ground at different depths, sort of 6 inches, and every year they took out the seeds and tested for viability. So within just a year, about 15% of those that produced September, August of that year, coming to next year, only 50% of those will be just viable. So if we have a good program for next year in terms of zero tolerance or reducing seed production on those weeds that will germinate the next year, then the second year we'll only have to deal with 50% of those. And for if we had a good herbicide or weed management program that will keep down or prevent seed production of Palmer and water hemp, within 3 years, you can pretty much drive down the density and the population of Palmer and water hemp. But if we bury them, it slightly increases the longevity of those seeds for both weed species. And with the cold temperatures that we have here, there was a study, 4 years in the freezer, after 4 years, 90% plus germination. So I guess there's a good reason to believe that both species can thrive here out in Northwest counties and also in the Pacific Northwest. So I think that was my question. Can they thrive here? I think the answer was yes. So I tried to look into so what if you have Palmer and water in your field, what are your options in your crops? So basically, we have a lot of options in corn and soybean, small grains as well. But pulses, sunflowers, red beans, peas, we only have creeks in there. And they emerge late and they have long period of emergence. So we might hit them with the pre's, but we don't have any effective post-emergence in these crops. So that can be a problem. So that's why we're over the last recent years, a lot of weed science like Dr. Brian Jenks, Joe Likely, and all other weed science have been vigilant in terms of getting out the information for preventing the introduction of Palmer and water hemp in our fields and in North Dakota as well. So detection, how do we detect it? We have to know which one are we looking at. So these are first we have to look for hairs on the stem. If there's no hair, then that will be either Palmer or water hemp. But if it has hairs, it could be redwood pigweed or Powell amaranth. The difference between redwood pigweed and Powell is that redwood had dense hairs on the stem. short hairs. But with Powell, you see that it's sparse. Next to look at is so you've ruled out that, oh, this plant had no hair, then it's either Palmer or Waterham. You have to look next, the leaf petal and the leaf shape. Palmer tends to have an egg-shaped leaf compared to the long, narrow shape of the Waterham. As well as when you take a leaf, fold that leaf, fold that leaf at the base. The petal of the Palmer amaranth is longer than the leaf blade, while in Waterham, it's shorter. So those are great indicators to differentiate which one is Palmer, which one is Waterham. Now, well, some of those plants had scapes, and later on, especially in the August, September, we want to go out and scout the fields to see for Palmer and Waterham, and you can differentiate them too with the seed head. So with Palmer, you have long terminal seed heads, and with Waterham, same long terminal seed heads. But with regular pigweed and Powell, they're shorter and they're more compact, more branched. So with regular pigweed, it's usually like 2 to 4 inches, but the Powell will be from 4 to 8 inches of the seed head. But this one is like a foot long maybe. So that's the difference. Another key difference in Powell amaranth is that in in Palmer, the male seed head is soft and the female seed head is prickly. But with Waterham, either male or female, it'll be a soft seed head. That's the only difference. Now, if you have Palmer in your field, the North Dakota Department of Ag have a preset protocol on what you should do. You can actually go to this website here and submit a report if you have suspected plants in your field. So basically, after scouting the field, you have to leave that alone. If you suspect some plants in the field, take photos, record the location, as well flag that in the field, and then immediately call your county weed officer or weed scientist or weed specialist to help in the confirmation and ruling out if this is Palmer or Waterham, and then save some tissues from this plant for genetic confirmation as well. And working with the county weed control officer, after confirmation or ruling out, this plant should be destroyed, and then working with the county weed control officer, continue monitoring it for 3 to 5 years.
What's the method of destruction of Palmer?
If you, in the North Dakota website, either you burn it or bury it. I prefer burning it. Yeah.
But not on site.
What's that?
You want it pulled, but not burned on site, correct?
Correct. Yes, yeah.
I don't think you wanna take it anywhere, do you? You can burn it right there.
Yes, because you don't want to, you just don't know that the seed can mature after pollination. Seeds can mature within 1 to 2 weeks. Actually, about 9 days. So that's pretty quick. Just a couple more slides. If you haven't seen this, it's a really good resource where this series of videos where Dr. Joe likely discuss about the update on Palmer amaranth in the state, as well as how it needs to control them in corn and soybean. And this was funded by the Corn Council, North Dakota Corn Council, and then the Soybean Council. But these are the links that you can use to know more about Palmer amaranth. And here, there's a link for wild border weeds if you want to know more about weeds other than in addition to Palmer and Waterham. I see that you have the new weed control guide. Just an update. Black Star can now be used soybean in Williams, McKenzie, and Divide counties. And this was due to work with Dr. Brian Jenks. He was able to secure a 24C label, special local needs. And this is meant for controlling our glyphosate resistant weeds in the west. Specifically kochia, glyphosate resistant kochia, and glyphosate resistant marestate. These are some of the updates. Not all of it. Top is labeled. Top is herbicide now labeled in lentils. And for this weed of the year, it was a close battle with leafy spurs and kochia, but the unanimous decision was leafy spurs. Anyways, that's all I have. These are I'm Charlie Lim, Extension Weed Specialist, minor research. Wilson Research Center. These are my phone numbers, and this is the address at the Wilson Research Center. And if you have questions, you can shoot me an email or call me. It doesn't matter if it's a weekend or a weekday. If I can answer it, as much as I'll answer it.
Any questions for Charlie? Questions? What do you know about barnyard grass?
It loves a lot of moisture.
Yeah, this year was bad.
It was really bad this year, exactly, yeah. I don't think it's gonna be much of a problem, I guess, it's just the environmental effect, I guess, that we've seen this year. But let me know if you observe something different. The one thing I've seen very bad this year was the foxtail species. Maresdale, Russian thistle as well. I've seen a lot of soybean as well as fields planted with pulses.
Any other questions for him? If not, let's see what we're. Thanks, Charlie. And next, and he's online and looks like he's ready.
Have you got me allowed to share the screen?
Yep, you should be able to.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, am I ready to go?
We're still seeing it as like you're able to edit it in PowerPoint.
Okay.
There we go. Now you're good.
Okay, I appreciate your time. I see it's 4:42. So I'm going to try and be brief, but what I have to tell you is extremely important. And I'm going to buzz through a bunch of slides very quickly. However, this slide may be the most important. I'm going to tell you that you should spray your weeds when they're less than 3 inches tall. Check your weeds within 7 days after your burn down. So assuming everyone's no-till, we rely on our burn downs to start clean. I advise you to check your weeds about 5-7 days after application to make sure that those weeds in your burn down are dying. Do not assume that the herbicides in your burn down are killing the weeds. Use 2 modes of action or more where possible. Continue to use your soil applied herbicides and maybe consider evaluating some different cultural practices that may reduce weed competition. Okay. So years ago, we used to use Glean and Ally to control kochia and many other weeds. These are our group 2 herbicides. Now we don't use Glean and Ally anymore, but we use Express, Harmony, Affinity, Raptor. These don't control kochia. 2,4-D doesn't control kochia very much anymore either. And we're starting to see some dicamba resistance and some starring resistance. It's not widespread, but it's out there. Group 14 herbicides that we use in our burn down herbicides. Can you see my pointer?
Yeah.
Okay, our burn down herbicides, we mostly use a lot of aim and sharpen. Then our soil applied herbicides that provide residual, we use Spartan, Spartan Charge, Spartan Elite, Authority Products, Valor. Further east, and now as Charlie told you, under irrigation, we can use Flexstar in soybean. Okay, here's a picture that I took in 2015 where this kochia from Dickinson survived up to 2.67 pints of wide match. Remember, we typically apply wide match at 1 pint. I will tell you now that Rugby and Minot now have kochia that is more tolerant to spray. What we're starting to see is it will damage the top or suppress the top, but then it'll start branching. Here's another slide where it shows some resistance to glyphosate. Here, this plant even starring at 2x survived, and then dicamba as well. Shifting gears a little bit, this is some data from 2021 where our group 14 herbicides worked really well on kochia. This is Spartan Charge at 5 ounces, Authority MTZ, 99% control. This was with Valor in the fall, then Authority MTZ in the spring. Here is Spartan plus Sharpen, works really well. Reglone Metribuzin worked pretty good too. Glyphosate didn't work quite as well. Now this was kochia that was 1/2 to 2 inches tall. Now, how many in the room, and Travis, you're gonna have to help me. How many in the room use AIM, Sharpen, Spartan Charge, or Anthem Flex? Do you get a raise of hands?
Yeah, about 6, is that right?
Yeah.
6 out of how many?
6, 7 out of. $12.
Okay, so about half the people in the room either use AIM or Sharpen, Spartan Charge, or Anthem Flex. Okay, so for kochia control in lentil, this is what's labeled. What if we lost Sharpen and AIM and Valor? This is what we would be left with in lentil. In peas, this is what we have labeled. Paralysis on land, Spartan Charge, Broadax, Authority Supreme, Metribuzin, Valor, Bascaran Raptor, so on. But, these don't work as well on kochia, but for our burn downs, we rely on Sharpen, Gramoxone, AIM, and probably to a certain extent Spartan Charge. But what if we were to lose these group 14s? This is what we'd be left with. Chickpea, same thing. We've got tough post-emergence, but that breaks the bank. We've got similar herbicides to chickpeas, or excuse me, to peas. But what if we lost our group 14s? This is what we'd be left with. So just a reminder, we use AIM and Sharpen for our burn downs. We use Spartan Charge as well for a burn down, but plus residual. Now take a look at this picture. This picture should scare everybody in the room. This is kochia that was sprayed with AIM at 1 and 2 ounces with appropriate adjuvants. This is 6 days after treatment, sprayed on 2-inch kochia. We got 3 reps of each. So this is our 1x rate. This is our 2x rate up at the top. This is a known susceptible population. This is kochia that was collected from Minot, Berthold, Mandan, and Mott. So what this tells us is we have kochia now in the western part of the state that is not being controlled by AIM. Here is a picture at 8 days after treatment. And here is kochia 13 days after treatment. So our known susceptible population is still being controlled, but these other populations escaped and look like a disaster. What about sharpen? This is sharpen, again at 1 to 2 ounces. Here's our susceptible population. Here's Minot, Berthold, Mandan, and Mott. Now, what we did see with these populations is that sharpen did cause more foliar burn on these leaves, but this is 6 days after treatment. Here's 8 days after treatment, and here is 13 days after treatment. So even though there was more burn on the leaves, they did not control the kochia compared to our susceptible check. So we are also testing right now some other populations that we collected. One of those is from Crosby. We've got a few more from Minot area, Sherwood, Mohall, and we should have those results in a week or two. So what this says is that, so that's why I told you in that first initial screen, we can't assume anymore that our burn downs are going to be effective, because over the last 2 years, we have seen kochia that's not being controlled, and we suspected potential resistance, but it wasn't until last month when we took these pictures that we confirmed it. So if you're using AIM and sharpen in your burn down, make sure that you're going out and monitoring after application. Make sure that those weeds are dying. Continue to use these residual herbicides. Now, I asked the question up here, and I hope this went through your mind. Since we confirmed that we have resistance to AIM and sharpen, and Spartan and Valor are in the same mode of action as AIM and sharpen, does that mean, I asked a question here, will Spartan and Valor still control kochia that's resistant to the foliar applied group 14s? We don't have a solid answer for that yet. But my short answer for now is, based on experience in Midwestern states with water hemp and Palmer, kochia control with Valor and Spartan may still be effective, or hopefully at most only slightly reduced. We're starting some research to find this out. Go through this graph. Okay, so at the top here, and I've got to move a screen so I can see on my end. Okay, I'm having trouble seeing the screen, but Travis, on the right-hand side, does it say susceptible on the top? On the left side is resistant.
Yeah, resistant on the left, susceptible on the right.
Yeah.
So what this is on the right-hand side, Palmer was resistant to the foliar soybean herbicides like Flexstar, Cobra, and Blazer. And they wanted to know, would Valor and Spartan still control those plants? So these are the susceptible populations. These are the resistant populations. These were the ones on this side that were resistant to those foliar herbicides. So if we look first at Valor, so this is the susceptible. These polymers were susceptible to those group 14s. When we look at so this is herbicide dose percent of the 1x rate. So at 100% of the 1x rate, right here is essentially the 1x rate. This would be a half a rate. This would be a 2x rate. So if we look over here at the resistant plants, you can see that this curve starts to move up at the lower rates. But at the 1x rate here, the plants are still being controlled. The resistant species, resistant polymer is still being controlled. But if you look up here at Spartan, so here's the 1x rate controlling the polymer, but you look over here at the 1x rate, and this graph has started to move up. That's concerning. So this is polymer fresh weight percent of the non-treated. So if it was being controlled, then this line would be down here. So what we're seeing is it looks like the Valor still controlling the polymer. Spartan maybe a little bit weaker. Instead of giving 90 to 100% control, it's maybe providing about 80% control. So that's a good thing, but it's still worrisome. All right. So we showed you AIM and Sharpen, some resistance to those herbicides. AIM is also in Spartan Charge. AIM is also included in Anthem Flex. Sharpen is in Verdict with Outlook, as well as Zidua Pro, Sharpen Pursuit Zidua. Probably not many people in your area use this. Okay, so how do we proceed? Not every kochia plant or population is going to be resistant, but we do need to be more vigilant in scouting after application. We need to continue using residual herbicides and use metribuzin where possible. Metribuzin is a different mode of action. We can use metribuzin in soybeans, peas, and lentils. And most of you are aware of metribuzin. You've probably used it, tested it. You know that it may not be for all soils, but we may need to continue using metribuzin to try and help us with kochia. Scout those fields 5 to 7 days after application and try and use multiple effective modes of action where possible. We've seen gramoxone control these resistant kochia plants very well. You could still tank mix gramoxone with Sharpen or gramoxone with metribuzin. We have seen synergism with gramoxone and metribuzin on kochia and horseweed. Gramoxone plus Spartan Charge. I've got to repeat it here because this is what the Spartan Charge label says. It says that you can tank mix Spartan Charge with gramoxone or Roundup or Liberty. Obviously, I've got an asterisk here because for those growers that have this kochia that's resistant to AIM and Sharpen, I don't know that this combination will work anymore because of a lot of our kochia is already Roundup resistant. And now if the AIM component of Spartan is not going to control the kochia, then this treatment may not be effective. We may have to go with something else. Now, the Liberty can be used in a burn down in front of certain crops, but we have to be careful with Liberty because we know it's not that effective in cold conditions. So the first week of May in a burn down may not be the best time to use Liberty. It may need to be warmer. Sharpen plus Roundup used to be a very common treatment for us. And it may still work for many growers, but you're just going to have to spray it, keep an eye on it, and see if it's working or not. We can use dicamba in front of wheat. The generic labels specify 3 days per ounce prior to wheat. Here's a study where we showed gramoxone still provides effective kochia control. Here's 97% control compared to Sharpen and Reviton. So this was applied May 26th. These ratings were June 2nd and June 18th. So, 3 weeks after treatment, gramoxone is still providing good control. Okay, I'm going to skip through some slides so in your post wheat treat herbicide choices, you want to use at least 2 or 3 modes of action in your wheat. Something like Husky FX has 3 modes of action. If you go Talon or Starane, that's 3 modes of action. Kochivore, Clean Sweep, that's a 2,4-D bromoxynil Starane. Battalium Amped is an Everest bromoxynil Starane. And there's more that I could list here. But generally, we're relying on bromoxynil and Starane, as well as something else, to control kochia in wheat. And when we've had these 2 to 3 modes of action, it's worked quite well. Okay, we've talked about using Fall Valor. Here is an untreated. Here we use Fall Valor. You see less kochia, less Russian thistle there. In that study, we reduced using Valor. This is 3 ounces. We reduced the kochia population about 60%. The Russian thistle about 80%. Here's a slide I've showed before where they used Valor metribuzin in the fall. Worked very good on the kochia. So Valor, until we can prove that we've got kochia that's resistant to our residual group 14s, we're going to continue using Valor as a fall option. Spartan is another fall option, although as I've told you before, I'd rather see you use Spartan in the spring because Spartan is more water soluble and will tend to leach more than Valor does. Prowl is still an option. Sonland is still an option. We're evaluating Zidua as a potential option. Zidua is not cheap, but we've seen in some studies that it does have some kochia control. It just doesn't work that well in the spring for us. So we're evaluating it as a fall option. Okay. Before I get into tough on lentil, which is my last topic, I've just got 2 slides left. Do you have questions?
How does gramoxone work on kochia early in the spring when it's cold?
What I always say is there's no silver bullet for 50 degrees. I have used, I can say I have used gramoxone May 15th on when we're 65 degrees. It has worked quite well. I just, the first week of May, I don't have confidence that you're going to get as good a control if we're at 45, 50 degrees. But there's not much that works great at 45 to 50 degrees. We're gonna have to have some luck from Mother Nature.
We used Gramoxone last year in Lake May and had terrible luck with it.
Okay, how big were the weeds?
Big,
I think that was the problem.
I suppose.
That's why in my first slide, I said, we've got to spray weeds when they're less than 3 inches tall. I've sprayed Gramoxone on 1 to 3 inch weeds, and it can be quite effective on 1 to 3, but you get any bigger than that, you're going to start missing. The other issue with Gramoxone is if you try and get by with 5 to 10 gallons per acre of water, it's not going to work as well. You got to go at least 15. Other questions?
Think you're good to keep going, Brian?
Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about Tough, even though I am disgusted with the company for their pricing on Tough. But I'm going to talk about chickpea, and then I'm going to do one slide on lentil. So the current Tough price is about $30 an acre. They helped us out. They came down from 43 down to $30 an acre. So I still don't think anybody's going to use it. But Tough will control kochia. But at this price, just know that it's there. Know that it has to be used at this 24-ounce rate. If you note that the label states, if you use less than 24 ounces may result in incomplete weed control. This is true. I have tested this numerous times, and I'll tell you, you have to go at the 24-ounce rate or you're going to see less weed control. Got to spray it on small weeds, 15 gallons an acre, preferably. I have sprayed it at 10. It's been okay. Can apply it with a grass herbicide, best in warm, sunny conditions. Chickpeas, excellent tolerance. But you, as usual, never rely on Tough alone. Got to put down a pre like Spartan to reduce that weed pressure. Now, last year, the company gave us a big surprise toward the end of May. And they came out with this label on lentil, which completely shocked us. Now remember that their own label says if you use less than 24 ounces may result in incomplete weed control. But on their supplemental label, the company says you can use 12 to 20 ounces prior to lentil or 6 to 20 post for lentil. The supplemental label also allows a tank mixed with metribuzin or a grass herbicide. Now, they have a tech sheet that they put out that gives you additional information, but it's not what they have on the tech sheet is not on the label. On the tech sheet, they say 7 ounces of Tough plus 2 ounces metribuzin applied at the 3 to 5 node stage with 20 gallons of water. That's their recommendation. What they don't say, but I will tell you, and these are my words here, expect significant chlorosis and necrosis, 20 to 40% or more with this Tough plus metribuzin. Now, some of you may have applied metribuzin to lentil, and you know that, farmers have told me you spray it on your lentils and you don't look at the field for 2 weeks. Well, it's the same thing with this. I think injury will be worse in cold, wet conditions. The lentils do recover over time, especially with later rainfall, but is that complete recovery? I don't know, to be determined. We have no independent data on weed control effectiveness or yield impact with this combination. So I would, the only way I would do this is if you had a wreck with weeds. If the weeds were still small, 3 inches tall, and you're trying to decide whether to disc it up or try tough plus metribuzin, that's probably the only way I would use this at this time. Okay,